Good afternoon, and welcome to our virtual forum that we call in Spanish Luz de Alante. That means the light in the front that helps you to guide your way forward. I am the lead integrator of the Echar Palante, that Move Forward Alliance, and we have been working together for 11 years and 4 months now, trying to help Puerto Rico move forward, specifically focused in developing a culture of entrepreneurship, innovation, resilience, and sustainability. These forums are used to transfer knowledge to all our allies, and we actually record them and redistribute to our database. This is the 5th forum that we are dedicating to the Puerto Rico Demographic Challenge. This we started in collaboration with the University of Puerto Rico and the university's president, Dr. Luis Ferrao. This is a special cause for him. And I will leave you with Dr. Eileen Figueroa-Rivera from the University of Puerto Rico, that in representation of Mr. Ferrao and their leadership will serve today as our Master of Ceremonies. And so welcome and thank you so much to our dear friend Lorena Molina, who is helping to make the connection with the census and is helping us to identify all the different resources that can help us study, identify opportunities, and actually develop this strategy to see how we don't think we're going to reverse the demographic contraction. We think we're going to develop strategies to be smart about how we invite folks to come to live in Puerto Rico that will help us to rearrange the demographic pyramid. So I wanted to start sharing with you where our thinking is right now. So without more to say, I leave you with Eileen. Thank you.
Buenas tardes a todos y todas. Hola, gracias por conectarse, gracias por una vez más estar en la sala virtual de Echar Palante. Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are.
Ahí está.
Nice to have you all in our dining or living room or whatever you want to be, or you feel great, of our Echar Palante house. Today we have a special day. This is our 5th, as Gloria says, this is our 5th Luz de Alante encounter or series, which are very interesting because we start on May, was the first one, I believe so, right, Gloria? So after we've been having this conversation in order to try to resolve one of the things that we have in Puerto Rico, one of the most problems we have in Puerto Rico, that is the demographic infiltration that we have. So today we have a special visitors of friends, and of course, the ones that are gonna share with you, and of course, I'm gonna present it in a few, and then our friends from the federal census, that we're going to have share their indicators, their vulnerability indicators for the past year. And they will be talking about how is this going on, the data they have. So without any ado, please, let me introduce to Heather. I believe that they're going to do it together, right?
I'm going to do a quick introduction of Heather and then pass it on to Bethany.
Thank you. Thank you, Lorena. Nice to see you too.
Thank you.
Lorena, please, the mics are yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much for giving us the time to present again on behalf of the Census Bureau and the Department of Commerce. I know we continue participating in this series and look forward to many of them to come. I'm Lorena Molina Irizarry. I'm currently serving as Senior Advisor of Puerto Rico at the Department of Commerce and at the U.S. Census Bureau. And today we have joining us Bethany Desalvo for a Center from Economic Studies, who worked tirelessly to put out the community resilience estimates for Puerto Rico. Community resilience estimates were launched during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, more broadly to really understand vulnerability and risk factors at the lowest level of geographies across the nation. And they were just launched for Puerto Rico this past June. So they show social vulnerability, really helpful data in the event of preparedness and disaster management and recovery, using data from the PRCS, the Puerto Rico Community Survey, and includes several risk factors like poverty, educational attainment, employment, disability, and many others. So the output here, like what we want to convey, right, is how Puerto Rico can measure social vulnerability to disasters at the municipal level on the census tract level, so the smaller level of geography, and produce more precise and timely measures of understanding our communities, and specifically those that are the more vulnerable to disaster. So it's really understanding the metrics and the community's capacity to withstand and recover from any incident, specifically such as here.
But thank you so much for having me and the team here today. I've brought with me a few of my colleagues, Heather King, Joey Marshall, and Jim Scurry. I can't see the screen, so if you put a hand up or something in the chat, I won't be able to see it.
Can you click hide on the? There's a button that says hide. Yeah,
yes.
Hide. Thank you.
And feel free to interrupt me if you want to jump in. If you want to ask something in the chat, one of them will be able to answer you more immediately. But absolutely, I like to feel like a conversation is happening in here. It's an absolute honor to be here. I've worked with this team for years, trying to figure out how we can release estimates for Puerto Rico. In 2020, we released the community resilience estimates, and we repeatedly received requests, what about Puerto Rico? And we were actively trying to figure out how we could do it. And we kind of had, I call it a math nut with the data, trying to figure out how we'd be able to release something that was accurate enough to be useful. And when Jim Scurry and Heather King, who were on the call, joined the team, they put their heads together and really figured something out that our area has been working on for a long time. So I'll walk you through what we've done. And you'll hear me say a few times today that these estimates are experimental. And what that means is they're mathematically accurate. We've reviewed all of that. We know that that's true. But what we wanted to do is put them up in this way so that we could get comments from experts on the culture of Puerto Rico, from stakeholders within Puerto Rico, to be able to make the best possible estimates. So we're going to show you what we have, and we really encourage you to let us know what you think about them, what you like, what you don't like, suggestions you might make. So you can say it here, you can email me. We would love all of your suggestions. So again, thank you for having us, and it's an honor and something we've been working towards getting here to be able to create something useful that has utility for the island. So what are we measuring? So we call this the community resilience estimate. These are the community resilience estimates. The estimates really are more of a measure of social vulnerability, but we are building an entire program, like data infrastructure, to be able to answer all kinds of questions. We're working with FEMA, with NOAA, with other agencies to be able to bring in data to look at all different aspects of disasters and of demography. So when you first introduced us to you all, you mentioned demography. I'm a demographer, Heather's a demographer. We care very deeply about demographic trends and understand a little bit about what the island's going through. So these particular measures are more nested in the disaster literature, and it's basically the idea that individuals and households within a community, a measure of how they can cope with the external stresses of the impacts of disaster. Basically, the research says that resilience can be predicted by individual and household characteristics. And so these are those measures. And the question is, why did census get into this? Census has long provided data that is useful, demographic data on businesses, data that help during emergencies. But we created this measure that's kind of more like a piece of information, like an index that says, hey, these are some hotspots you should be paying attention to in the times of disasters, whether you're planning for, recovering from, or responding to a disaster. And so there's a strong literature here about what kind of variables go into it, these types of measures, but they're useful measures because they allow the federal government to release resources. And so none of these measures are perfect, but the idea is that the government needs to be able to distribute resources, and how does it know how to do that? And so we want to create the best possible measures with the most utility, so that the government can release resources and get it to the people that need it the most. And so there are other measures out there that do this. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have a beautiful measure. Some universities have created measures well ahead of when we started this in 2020. But what we noticed was that because of the way the metrics were created, there's some error in there. Obviously, there's error in all data, but the amount of error is potentially troublesome, particularly for communities that might be most at risk. And some of that is the nature of survey data, and some of that is the nature of the statistical tools that we use. So what we did was we jumped in the conversation and we're able to create the estimates from the individual level data that the Census Bureau, has behind the firewall, and the data are behind the firewall because of privacy. And so if we create the measures from that microdata, from the data behind the firewall, then we can build it up, we can maintain the correlations across the variables, and we can build it so that it has the least amount of error possible. And that really, really matters for high-risk communities. So how were the community resilience estimates used in the last few years? In the pandemic, FEMA used it to inform vaccine distribution. You could use it to identify, some states use it to identify where to provide education and public health standards, to pinpoint areas that are greatest risk of inequitable outcomes. We are working with Response right now in Hawaii to get them some data and helping them to interpret what different kinds of nuances mean. Natural disasters, you might use these types of metrics for mitigation planning and things like that. So when I say we build the data at the lowest level of geography, what does that really mean? And so, we collect data. So we collect the Puerto Rico Community Survey and other data at the individual level. We go to people's houses and we collect that data, or online surveys, or however that one is done. And then the data start getting aggregated up and up and up, right? And so since we can create the data at the lowest level of geography, we're able to reduce the risk or really reduce the error in the final estimate. And so we can look at an individual person and see the poverty status, the broadband access, the vehicle access, or any of the other variables for that individual person, right? And so if you're creating a metric, for those who have to create the data with publicly available data, some of those nuances are blended out, adding error on top of error on top of error whenever you're creating these kinds of measures. So some key background: the community resilience estimates for the United States were released in June of 2020 in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and now they're produced annually. So just like the CRE for Puerto Rico, they were created at first under the experimental tag, and then within the next year, after we received comment and we felt confident that the estimates had utility, they were useful, we started to release them as official estimates. My hope is that that we'll do that same with the CRE for Puerto Rico. Yes. Oh, not a question. Okay. So we use person and household level data to create the estimates. And then this makes our estimates the most timely. So we're able to release the single year estimates as soon as the American Community Survey data are released. So, this year you'll see our estimates coming out a little after the single year data. They're the most accurate in terms of precision, reliable, and granular. So we provide estimates for every tract in the United States and in Puerto Rico. And again, these are released as experimental. So there's 10 risk factors or individual vulnerability factors, which I'll show you in the next slide. And basically what you get, and I'll show you the tool, there's kind of like these categories, low, medium, and high. One of the beautiful things about these estimates is they actually tell you the number of people in each category, which is really useful. So I'll show you in the next slide after this one what the individual vulnerability risks are. But basically using the 2019 Puerto Rico Community Survey, we will update that to the new year soon. We fit a high quality CRE model to capture social vulnerability in the area. So the outputted geographies are Commonwealth level, Municipio level, and tract level. We reduce the coefficients of variation as a similar rate for the CRE. This just means that we reduce the error in the estimate by a significant amount, 30+%. In more kind of rural parts, we reduce the error by a bigger amount. So the question, has been like, other federal agencies have created tools that are very similar to this. So why is census, getting in this game? And I mentioned before, it's because we can reduce the error. And we reduce the error significantly, and we reduce the error for communities that are most at risk in terms of social vulnerability. And so that's the really big win here. When this administration talks about equity, and we want to really start thinking about pushing towards, and there's executive orders about what are we doing regarding equity. I think doing better with our measures. So first of all, having a measure, and then doing better and making sure that we're paying attention to marginalized communities is incredibly important. And so that's why we entered into this. So the particular methodology that we used is small area modeling. Again, I have the mathematicians on the call for the statisticians in the room who have questions about that. I will walk through kind of a plainer language explanation of what that means. So small area.
Bethany, yes. So sorry to interrupt. Can you also explain what a census tract is and what are the compositions of a census tract? Because I think that's also a source of confusion sometimes between municipal geography and census tract.
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on municipal geographies. Jim or Heather, do you want to, I can answer this, but if you guys want to jump in since you created the data, you're welcome to. I can't see you either, so.
I'm not sure if they're on, but feel free to just very high level.
Okay.
What is
yeah? Okay. So a census tract is a grouping of households, usually about 3,000-4,000. It's our proxy for like a neighborhood, and each of the census geographies are nested within one another. In terms of municipios, that how that exactly relates to the tracts, I would need Jim to jump in. So Jim, if you can hear this, just go ahead and put the answer in the chat. So, okay, small area estimation. So basically a small area is any geographic level or domain not supported by an existing survey sample. So what that really means is the Census Bureau does the Puerto Rican Community Survey or some other survey, and they are able to release some level of information based off of the structure of the survey design and the sample size and all of that. So when you know that the Census Bureau asks a question but we don't release data, usually that's because the sample wasn't big enough or something like that. So that's when you would come talk to us and say, we know Census has some information on this, but we don't necessarily know we don't necessarily have enough information to be able to release it. So you bring in the small area estimation experts who can put multiple sources of data together, like administrative records or multiple surveys, decennial census, and we can put the data together in such a way that we can create a new estimate. And I'll walk through a little bit how we do that. But basically, estimates from these small samples can lead to high standard errors. So the small area estimation techniques borrow strength from other areas. And the techniques enable the Census Bureau to provide high quality estimates, quality being measured by margin of error and coefficients of variation. And we provide those when direct methods cannot estimate quantities with acceptable accuracy. So here are the vulnerability indicators that we use specifically for Puerto Rico. So it's the poverty rate. We can have lots of conversations about this poverty estimate. And from what I understand, there's some experts on poverty potentially on this call. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you and would be more than happy to set some other conversations aside to be able to engage in how we measure poverty. My team, our team also produces the small area income and poverty estimates. And so we think about poverty and how to measure it a good deal. So we landed on this particular level, but it could be that we should move this around and do some tests. Single or zero caregiver households. So what this means is the person is living alone, or maybe it's a person over 65 living alone, or a parent and a small child. This is a measure of crowding. No one in the household with a high school degree, age 65 plus. No one in the household is employed full-time year-round. That's a very conservative measure. We talked with a group of economists who thought that this was the right measure, but I'd flag this as one that I'd love some feedback on from you all in terms of what the expectations in Puerto Rico might be. Disability status, health insurance coverage, vehicle access, and households without broadband internet access. So small area estimation. So basically the small area statistical models take the direct estimate. That's the survey estimate that we go out and we ask people questions. That's the direct estimate. And we borrow strength from related geographies, times, intergroups through auxiliary data, such as administrative records. So you take the survey estimate and then the survey estimate modeled with administrative data, and you come out with a modeled estimate. So the direct and the indirect estimates become a composite estimate weighted by relative precision. So, so you can see this move here. So small area estimates for areas with large sample size, really, you can see the survey data has high relative precision. And then for small sample sizes, the indirect estimates have the higher relative precision, meaning more weight is given to the indirect estimates. So on June 7th of this summer, the Census Bureau released these experimental community resilience estimates for Puerto Rico. We used the 10 risk factors from the Puerto Rico Community Survey, and the estimates are state, commonwealth, municipio, census tract. We provided a interactive tool, which I can pop up and show you all, and also put it in the chat. And the documentation was translated into Spanish. I would love to know how we did on that. We did hire translators who, speak Puerto Rican Spanish, but I would love to know if y'all agree with that. So this is what the map looks like. This is just a static frame. I can bring up the actual interactive map in a minute, but sometimes they get tricky. So I wanted to show you this picture here. So this is what it would look like. On the top, you see the 0 risk factors, 1 and 2, and then 3 plus. Again, I'll come back to this. So some brief findings. There's lots of good stuff to kind of dig through here, and you can download the estimates also from our webpage. Is for individuals in the high risk category, so that's 3 plus risk factors, the estimates for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico is more than double the national estimate of the United States, so 46.1% versus 21.6%. All municipios in Puerto Rico, 87% of tracts have higher rates of individuals with 3 or more risk factors compared to the U.S. national estimate. The municipios of Maricao, Lajas, Guanica, and Sabana Grande and Ciales have significantly higher rates of individuals with 3 or more plus risk factors compared to the entire Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. So again, these are experimental estimates. We really want your feedback and feedback of other colleagues that you might have so that we can, enhance the estimates, make them better, and move towards having an official product that has a lot of utility for the island. So thank you. Here is my email. Let me show you this interactive tool quickly. Here we go. And I clicked on 3 plus risk factors, And what you do is you just zoom in. And you can really kind of get down in there. And whenever you hover over something, it will give you some information, including these stat flags, which tells you if the 3+ risk, or like if the risk category is significantly higher than the other geographies in Puerto Rico or than the United States. And it gives you the number of people in that particular category. So I just picked this geography at random, but I'm more than happy to show other geographies if helpful.
Bethany, one of the factors that was really of interest when we started
I will
disseminating, and I don't know if you
drop
can
this into the chat so that you can explore. Thank you, Jim, for the answer on municipios.
Sorry to leave you hanging, Bethany. This is Heather. I couldn't find my unmute button. Apologies, but yeah,
Okay.
Jim did a beautiful job of answering. Just to extend, so the census tracts are statistical geographical areas that the Census Bureau designs with every decennial census, and they're generally stable throughout the decade. On average, they have about 4,000 to 5,000 residents. The boundaries can change across the decade when there's been a significant increase in population or an annexation in the boundaries, but they're meant to be a statistical small area unit that you can analyze across the decade, and it gets updated with every decennial census. And like Jim pointed out in the chat, they're contained wholly within county equivalents, municipios in Puerto Rico and counties within the United States. There are tools to be able to relate tracts to different levels of geography. I think maybe zip code areas and things like that. A little trickier if you want to do like city boundaries and things of that nature. That gets really hard. And going to census designated place.
And this is Lorena. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Well, you can. So one of the interesting factors that we saw with the Puerto Rico data compared to the national data is the percentage of locations and households compared to the rest of the nation that had 3 or more risk factors. And one of the questions that we have received since we started disseminating the CRE for Puerto Rico is there a way that census, whether through the viewer or adding another function, that we can tell 5+ or 7+ risk factors, and what is the comparison of those that have 3+ versus more of these factors represented. So if we wanted to see all the households that have, let's say, 7 risk factors versus the 3, if that is something that the viewer can.
So
what was the question? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. I had lost sound. I didn't hear, but Heather heard it. So
I believe it's someone who put the mic on. That's okay. Please, everyone here, feel free to write on the chat whatever questions you have, or turn on their mics to make any question to Bethany. Bethany, thank you for your presentation. Very interesting.
And I'll repeat it real quick so just that we can clarify that, is that compared to the US, there are more households with 3 or plus risk factors than the national average. Is there a way, and we have gotten this request from other stakeholders, that the viewer or is there a way in the platform that people can select households with 5 or more or 7 or more risk factors versus just the 3?
Yeah. Heather, are you able to jump in on this one? I know that, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, the way that the method works is that we group just so that there are 3 groups, but it's flexible in how you can determine them. So we decide on that based on the distribution of the groups. You know, you don't want to have a low, medium, and group in such a way where the collection of risk factors for the low group is like 5% of the population, because the CVs really start to suffer. So it's a little bit of an iterative process and the needs for the sponsor, but the measure is pretty flexible in that way that you can define how you want to decide what low, medium, and high risk are by balancing what you want to measure and the statistical soundness of each of the groups and the related standard errors. And it's, you know, related to the size of the populations on average that are in each group. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sorry, I think yes. Luis, you have your hands on, please. Turn on your mic so you can make your question to Heather or Bethany. Hi.
I think you're still on mute.
Yeah, we couldn't hear you. Nope, not yet.
Luis,
No.
I think you lost out. Now you're there. You're okay now.
Now.
Your audio is okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Fine. Thank you very much, Desalvo and Molina Irizarry for the presentation. I'm so excited that the U.S. Bureau of Census you are putting in practice this small area estimation, which is a sophisticated statistical procedure that goes into the hierarchical modeling and multi-level statistics, which is very impressive. Now, first question is operative. How do we have access? Can we have access to these measurements of resilience? I mean, in the map. I mean, is there a link that we can access to that? And this is an operative question. I don't know if we may have access to that, and it might be useful. And second is, I read that you have these apparently 3 most important measurements for resilience, which are poverty, internet, and vehicle. But on the other hand, I saw you had 10 measurements. So how should I understand that? That means that these 3 ones are that you found more important, more sensitive, but still you measure the 10 of them. The thing is, I'm very interested, of course, in the resilience and so on, but I'm very interested also in the measurement of age, particularly in each household. How many households are without any individual which are in the 15 up to 65 years old? I mean, there is no economically active, potentially active individual versus the other households in which everybody is beyond the 65 years old threshold. Because for population studies that is very important. I was not clear if you can single out that indicator. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for the question. And I can tell you a little bit about what you can get access to. What's included in the data when you go to the little tool, and you can download the data for every census tract and every municipio in Puerto Rico. And you mentioned the 10 risk factors, and the outputs for this measure is the way that you measure all 10 is we look at any combination of 1 to 2 or 3 or more. So you have the percent of population for each census tract that's facing 0 of those risk factors, and those are marked as the low risk population. And so the segment of the population that has 1 to 2 of that list of total 10 risk factors, that measures the percentage of population that are at moderate risk. And then the population that has some combination of at least 3 of that 10 list of risk factors, can be any 3 or more. It can be age 65 plus, it can be no access to a vehicle, poverty, or any combination of risk factors that are on that list. There, we estimate the percent of the population that are facing 3 or more of those risk factors for every tract and every municipio. So at the moment, we're not publishing the individual risk factors. We're grouping them together in those low, medium, and high risk categories. And so the percent, the population estimates and the margin of errors are given for all 3 of those risk groups. Does that make sense and answer the question?
Yes, but I still can single out the age vulnerability, if you wish. I don't know how to call it, the age factor.
Yeah, I think just to translate that questions for the census team, I think the question that Lucy is asking is there a way to see what is the age of each household, or, you know, the median age of each household by, what are the age categories by household in Puerto Rico? So not group necessarily. Yeah,
so in this measure, we're not you can't see that from the outputs. It's the measure is the estimated population and the percentage in each of those risk group categories.
And so is there in the Puerto Rico Community Survey, is that data available? Or is it just licensed?
So the age, if you want to know so right now from published data, you could get 5-year estimates at the tract level on age detail. That would be one way to do it, and kind of put that up against the community resilient estimates of low, medium, and high risk to see, you know, what the composition of that tract is in terms of the risk factors, the individual risk factors. That's one thing that you could do. We've done that before in different applications of the community resilience estimates, right, Bethany? There was we did that for the EDA, the Economic Development Agency, and so you can bring in other data from, say, the 5-year ACS estimates to see the concentration on each of the individual risk factors for that list of 10. But the small area modeling, what we're measuring is those groupings of low, medium, and high risk.
There is another question in the public here, or you want to ask anything? We have the chat real activity right now. So this is the chat. Remember that we are recording this series, so we're gonna share later the link for this record. Is there any other question?
Yes, when we look at the viewer, let me place it here. When we look at the viewer, I see the Puerto Rico map and the municipalities by risk factors 0, 1 to 2, and 3+. So that's basically, the viewer is basically a very summarized overview. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then when we go to the survey about Puerto Rico Community Survey, and we go into the programs, open up, for instance, by municipality, and then I see Predo E, and I don't know what those are. My column says Predo.
Yeah, the downloaded data is going to be what you see in the viewer. So Predo is predicted counts for that 0, for the segment of the population that faces 0 risk factors. Okay. And like you're going to see like pre 1 to 2. That's the predicted counts from the model for that geography that are in the moderate risk factor category, and then pre-3P maybe, I don't remember the exact column headings, but that's what you're looking at. So all of the data that's shown in the viewer is what you can download. So there are modeled counts of the population that are in each one of those categories that you see in the viewer, the 0 risk factors, the 1 to 2, and the 3 or more. So the Preto is the counts, and then you should see a rate and then margins of error for everything. Is that?
Yeah, and I put the file layout document in the chat.
Yeah, I see the Preto E and Preto PE, Preto PM. Where do we see what the acronyms stand for?
There's a file layout document. I put it in the chat.
Oh, okay. I mean, is it on the, when you go to the site itself?
Yeah.
So if you click on the link of the PDF that Beth just dropped, you have each description for every one of those variables.
Where's that again?
Excuse me,
On the chat.
could someone present the screen while you're discussing this? So, because it will be useful for everyone to see the actual screen.
Okay, yes, it would. Let me see if
Here is the link on the chat that Beth just dropped. When you click on the link, you'll see here this table. So you have all the variables and then the description of each. So here you can see Preto E, Preto M, and it describes what is the variable.
And that's on the program survey site.
Yeah, it's on the link to the chat right now that she just dropped, and it's on the website. I'm just going to drop it again so you have it.
The layout PDF, the CRE
Correct.
layout. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Then one other question regarding method, just to be clear. And thank you, very appreciative of all this valuable information first and foremost. But coming from a bit of a research background, so when we look at in general at the different groups, the different risk groups, the three, what it would be the standard deviation or margin of error or confidence level on those estimated?
So the margin of error is included in the file. They're all reported at the 90% confidence level.
Yeah.
And the standard error for this model is based on how good the indirect estimate is and the size of the sampling variance in the direct estimate. So it's based on how good of a job, because remember this small area modeling technique is basically a really fancy weighted average, where you take on the one hand a direct survey estimate, just use the survey weights from the ACS and make these groups by themselves. I can tabulate the for each track in Puerto Rico, the weighted counts of people that have none of these risk factors, and I can get the percent within that track. I can do the same thing for the percent and number of people that have 1 to 2 of those risk factors, and then finish it up with 3 or more. So that's just using the survey by itself. And then there's another piece we call the indirect estimate that Bethany showed us, and we borrow, that's where we do all the modeling and borrow information across related geographies and demographic groups and then combine that modeled or indirect estimate with the direct estimate that we just made using a weight that takes into consideration how noisy that survey data is for that level of geography and how good our modeling is for that other piece. And so the margin of error is related to all of that.
Right.
And because we're bringing in additional information, we're doing something that's called increasing the effective sampling size by bringing in more information about a given geography. And that's how we're able to shave some of that, some of the noise off of the standard errors when you compare it to just using 1-year ACS data by itself.
You try to keep it with a minimum sample of what per category? What's your minimum you're using normally for considering it reliable?
Well, for tracks, there's there can be as low as 10 to as high as 200 for a given track. And so the reason that we're doing small area modeling here is because 1-year data for tracks are generally going to be too small to do anything with. And that's why we combine it with other data. So that's the whole I guess like punchline of of smaller modeling. We already know that track level for using just 1 year of ACS data is way too noisy to publish it on its own. And so that's why we use this technique to bring in another piece and do a little bit of modeling and borrow information from other related geographies, bring in related data to help fill in those gaps.
Are you trying to have an objective rule of thumb of standard deviation objective more or less on the
yeah, we kind of use the standard, we look at the CVs and think, if it's exceeds 30%, then that's pretty bad.
Okay. And then the rule of thumb is what, under 30% basically.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jose Luis, for your all your questions.
Jose Luis, sorry, could you please stop sharing your screen?
Stop sharing the screen.
Yeah.
We can see your desktop.
Yeah. That's my next statement that please
Sure.
stop. Okay.
Okay.
Let me invite you, Dr. Linton Wells. Lynn, are you there?
I am.
You are. Hi.
Hi.
Good friend of us here. Hello, nice to see you again, my dear friend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please join us to your comments and reflections about what the census present today.
Well, I'm really impressed by the extent of the error correction efforts that have been made to recognize all the differences in the data and the uncertainties in the data and to get the best possible. I guess the first question I'd like to ask is how long about will the estimates be considered experimental before they are decreed public? I mean, decreed final is a year, so how long is that evaluation period? The other question, though, from a demographic point of view, is given the projections of the change of Puerto Rico's population, are there any estimates that say by 2025 or 2028 or something, the change in the number of people in various age categories would change any of these estimates in different communities? Is that part of the effort that census goes to?
So I'll answer the first question, and then Heather, I'll pass the second to you since you're the expert on the population estimates data. And I think that's the answer. So with regard to how long the estimates are experimental, I think that there's no standard here. As long as there's not a math reason for them to be experimental, and there's not, we've passed all of the kind of the muster that we have to get for the math. What we really wanted was to have folks like Lorena put together groups like this and to hear what, about the utility of the data. So I think in the next few months, weeks even, we will hear from folks and I'll lean heavily on Lorena letting us know, like, you've talked to the key groups, and as long as there's no major flags, or if we make corrections, then we can move to make it official. So I don't expect it. I would expect it within the year if there's no major warnings. And so far, this is actually our first time getting together with stakeholders. So we do have some folks that we've worked with over the years that helped us when we built this, but now we had to make it public so everybody could take a look. I'll pass it to Heather to answer the second part of that question now.
So,
Thank you.
thanks, Bethany. So Lynn, could you just restate the second part?
Well, the question basically is a time series study of this.
Mhm.
We understand this is an evaluation now, but as the demographic projections of Puerto Rico change over the next, say, 5 to 10 years, is there a way to correlate that with the change in the risk estimates?
Well, luckily for us is that with each new year of data from population estimates, we incorporate that into. It's a big part of the modeling, actually, is the demographic distribution in the population. So that's already baked in to each release. So we don't say.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at a projection.
Mm-hmm.
Something that would say, based on what we think is happening, these 5 communities are likely to be the most increasingly vulnerable, and so steps might be taken now to.
Oh, well, yeah, we hadn't considered doing that yet.
No, yeah.
Maybe that's something you could help us with.
Yes, no, I think that kind of thing is possible, but it would take making some choices about the data that we need advising on. Census doesn't release below national projections. However, I do think that we can consider working together with stakeholders to create something that had utility. I think in terms of like what it would take to do that, it's potentially possible. We would
Yeah, it
just
might
need to
be
get
something
right people on the road.
a university data analysis group could do in conjunction with your data.
Sure, absolutely. And if you could actually, we could incorporate, if you gave us some projections that you made.
That's true.
Maybe we could think about doing it in that way. Again, we just wouldn't have, that's, I'm probably speaking out of turn. I'm just kind of, forgive me spitballing, but it's an interesting idea, and it doesn't seem like it's too much of an ask, but it's not something that we're currently doing.
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking of moving beyond outcome metrics to impact metrics. In some way you could say, gee, if this happened, you might actually be able to take mitigation efforts that might change the outcome.
And Lynn, I know you're also very well connected and tap into FEMA and NIST and other agencies that are working around emergency preparedness, response and recovery efforts, just way broader than just the data. Just to let you know that this team, specifically Bethany, they are working across the interagency with other emergency response agencies to understand what are the potential uses for this type of data. Like FEMA, they have the National Risk Index. Actually, we just had a conversation with them yesterday. There's a lot of potential use cases, usability for the data that perhaps, in a continued conversation with you and the GMU group, because we're also, and this is for Beth and Heather and others, we're also working with the Census Geo team, as you know, Deidre, Andrew Johnson, Linda Liptrap, on the geospatial side. So I think even considering what this projection could potentially help us with in the context of Puerto Rico and the geospatial efforts that are happening could really give us rich information moving forward around emergency preparedness and response and recovery efforts more broadly. So Lynn, I'm happy to connect you with Bethany and Heather so you can continue the conversation and perhaps how a collaboration with GMU and the work that you're doing on Puerto Rico could move forward.
I would love that. That'd be great.
Excellent. And I wanted to say, I think Bethany mentioned this in the presentation, but right now the CRE is using 2019 Puerto Rico community survey data. By December, I believe it's going to integrate 2021 data, correct? The PRCS 2021 data.
This is the goal, yes. Anytime you cross a decennial census, the geographies change, and so that's what takes a little bit longer. But you'll start seeing the estimates annually after. It's just that the years ending in 0 we have to go back and update programs and all kinds of fun stuff to get the new estimates out. So yes.
Thumbs up for that one. Thank you. Thank you. Please, Jose Luis, you want to share some of your reflections from the U.S Chamber of Commerce? Join us again in this conversation. And of course, anyone here in our living room or our Alante living room virtual in our house, please join us in this conversation. This is a big opportunity today.
Yes, we are working on the qualitative aspects of the diaspora dynamics, meaning why they left Puerto Rico and how they could be motivated to come back, what would be the factors, considerations they would have. So on that, we're working with Gloria and the Puerto Rico Chamber of Commerce to create a study that would look at those qualitative elements, along with the Puerto Rico Research Hub. Already spoke with Dr. Fernando Rivera. He's available. He's a PhD in sociology and an expert on this subject and has conducted research on this matter. He just revealed to me during our conversation 3 days ago that Congressman Darren Soto, with whom we've been speaking these days as well, actually assigned a grant, significant funds to allocate resources to diaspora studies at the Puerto Rico Research Hub these days. So they're working right along that. We're going to hopefully be working along with them if Gloria and the Chamber and Monpere Blanco see fit. They're available and they're willing to sit at the table. They're very good experts on this matter. So was the Center for Puerto Rican Studies in New York, with whom we work very closely. But as of late, they've been less involved in these kind of matters. They were in the past, and they have a lot of very useful research, lots of it based on census tract, census information that they distilled and turned from data into usable information for planning, which Dr. Wells may be well advised to look into. And it's already readily available, but it dates back a couple of years. So again, we're looking at these resources to come into play into analyzing diaspora dynamics, and hopefully the study will take place this year, from what I understand from Gloria and Ramon.
What was the name of the group in New York?
Center for Puerto Rican Studies. El Centro is the nickname, Center for Puerto Rican Studies, Hunter Cooney, and it was led by Dr. Edwin Melendez. He's an economist, PhD in economics. He was the executive director for 17 years. And a lot of the data is readily available. Just go in there and you can look at the archives, and they're readily accessible. They're depository of a lot of wealth of information, including in aspects such as cultural and musical and that kind of thing. But specifically on the census information, they have a lot of details and projections, estimations, and so on.
And they're a close partner of the Census Bureau, actually, at Centro Cooney. They have engaged with us for years. And currently they are in conversations with our populations division, and Nicholas Jones, who's our senior advisor on race and ethnicity. So they're very active in providing feedback to the census through our national advisory committees and through the OMB race and ethnicity working group as well. So I'm in direct conversation with that Centro regularly, and we're actually setting up a potential engagement that they would host. And definitely we want to invite Chair Alante to be part of those conversations. Now that the demographic and household characteristic data is available, that is aimed to be the next iteration for this Chair Alante convening, to have them present on the population and demographic characteristics that were out in May. There's an additional data set that is going to come out in September, and we're going to have them present in person in Puerto Rico at our Data Innovation Symposium. That is going to be October 12th through the 13th. So more information on that to come. So again, Census Bureau is going to be in Puerto Rico October 12th through 13th, and we're going to have several presentations, not only from Census, but other federal agencies and other stakeholders like CUNY. They actually participated also in the Opportunity Project last year, and they created a childhood vulnerability indicator as part of their top project. So I'm happy to share that as well with this group over email after this call.
I used data about a month ago on the presentation I made, mostly based on their information. And one of the key persons at Hunter Cooney, Jorge Silva Puras, was just promoted at Lehman College, and he's part of our chamber as founder, co-founder, and member of a board of advisors. So we keep a very close relationship there. Whenever you need to talk to Dr. Melendez, we can coordinate that as well. He's no longer the executive director. He moved out. That's why the center is not as focused on these matters, but they still deal with it. Vargas Ramos is the one currently dealing with census information.
Correct. Yeah. And he's a director of public policy.
Yeah. Lorena, you mentioned child vulnerabilities. I think that's something we should study in depth, especially knowing that there are so many kids in Puerto Rico that live with their grandparents or the families that are really diverse. And we need to understand that better, and the implications in terms of the vulnerabilities of children. So thanks for mentioning it, and definitely we will be interested, separated from the discussions about the demographic challenge, of course. Well, thank you very much to all of you. This has been really enlightening. I want to thank Lorena again for helping us to connect with the census. We really don't know this information, and you're helping us to see what is available and the possibilities. And I believe that as we start digging more, we're going to learn more and be more interested and probably become more helpful to you too, in terms of refining the information and the way it is presented. So thank you, all of you. Thanks to Linton for joining us so that he could know what you were doing and also help us with perspective. I don't know, Linton, if you have some additional closing comments.
No, just thank you so much for including me, Gloria. It's, I learned a lot today, and I think this is very applicable studies to what we're all trying to do. So thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Jose Luis, for your perspective, particularly in the research area. That was enlightening too. And definitely Bethany, thank you so much. And Heather for being with us, Dr. Perici. And please thank your boss for sending you here. You are already starting to add perspective, and our dear Eileen Figueroa, who served as master, our facilitator today. So thanks for all of you that join us today, and we will be continuing. Lorena is helping us to connect with the folks that are doing a more in-depth study about our Puerto Rican data that I believe is going to be available in September, right, Lorena? So as soon as it's available, we will reconnect, and we will be starting some discussions about the potential strategy to address the demographic challenge. Jose Luis already developed a draft, and we will start talking about that pretty soon. So thanks to all, and hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Take care.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Gloria, Lorena, and the census people. Thank you.
Gracias. Thank you.
Buenas tardes a todos. Buenas tardes.
Bye.
Linton, we're waiting for you next week.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Buenas
Thank you,
tardes.
Gloria.
Bye.
Thank you, Eileen.
Bye. See you, Lynn.
Okay, bye-bye.